From news and views, issues and opportunities, we'll have in-depth conversations with decision makers to find out what they know and what they think. I'm Rico Hizon, inviting you to join the exchange because your business is our business. The Philippine peso has been falling on hard times against the US dollar, and there's no telling how much more will the local currency depreciate to record lows. The weak peso has a knock-on effect on consumer prices in supermarkets, gas stations, or credit card and loan payments. Can overseas Filipino workers, freelancers, and those earning in dollars take consolation in the strong greenback? Or do they face uncertainties as well in a global economy that is weakening further than expected? One thing is for sure, we now have to pay more for what we import, such as oil, rice, pork, and other food products that are short in supply. How can businesses pivot to cheaper produce when costs keep rising for imported products? The vision of self-sufficiency in our C-Suite vision. Before 2022, the Philippine peso touched its lowest against the US dollar in October 2004 at 56 pesos and 45 centavos. Fast forward to 18 years later, the foreign exchange rate has depreciated to historical lows above 57 pesos to 1 US dollar. Who wins? Who loses? Or is it a zero-sum situation? Let's now have an exchange with AAA Southeast Equities President William Cabangon. Will, great to have you on the program. The peso, as you can see, continues to fall to historical lows against the US dollar. How concerned are you with this depreciation?
Well, Rico, I'm very concerned because primarily the peso really hurts us when thinking about inflation. When the global price of oil goes up, we pay twice as much when the peso gets weaker. So when you think about it that way, the peso really is something that all Filipinos, not just me, but everybody should be concerned about.
Please share with us, why is the peso continuing to fall against the US dollar? What are the key factors?
Well, right now, what we're seeing is a broad strength in the US dollar across all currencies. So the peso isn't the only weak currency that we see right now. You know, the Japanese yen, the euro, all of our ASEAN neighbors, everyone's currency right now is struggling against the US dollar. So, you know, there's a global shortage, not just of commodities, but also for dollars. Everyone wants dollars. So in that kind of world, we naturally see a weakness in the peso.
But the Philippine peso, Will, is one of the worst performing currencies among the weak currencies in the world. Why are we at the bottom?
Well, Rico, the primary problem there is that we are a net importer of goods. We don't really export much things. We import most of our food. We import most of our oil and gas. So at the end of the day, what we need is dollars, right? Other countries aren't looking for pesos to buy Filipino goods. It's Filipinos who need dollars to buy foreign goods. And that's why we're one of the worst performing currencies right now.
Who are the losers with the falling peso, Will?
Well, I think the losers with the weakening peso are the everyday Filipinos like you and me who buy imported goods, because naturally we're now paying more expensive prices for these everyday consumer items.
And who are the winners with the depreciation of the currency?
Well, the biggest winners with the depreciation are OFWs. Now, since OFWs earn in dollars or other foreign currencies, now that they are sending money back in time for the holidays, the peso value of their remittances are now much higher than they were last year, for example.
And of course, the July numbers for remittances are at a 7-month high. And that goes to show that more Filipinos are taking advantage of the weak peso vis-a-vis their respective currencies where they work.
That's right. And I think the BSP does expect that trend to continue well into the holidays.
And what impact does this weak peso have on the Philippine economy? Net, what kind of an impact does it have on growth rates?
Well, the Philippines as a consumer economy naturally will suffer a little bit because of this weaker peso. Again, all of our raw goods in manufacturing, our food, our gas for our cars, all of these are now becoming more expensive. That naturally has a negative effect.
And for the peso, Will, we are currently in uncharted territory, historical lows. What is the group's forecast? Will the currency continue to lose value? Is it headed towards 58 or even worse, 59 or even 60?
Well, Rico, right now, knowing what I know, I wouldn't rule out the possibility of the peso touching 60. Because what we're hearing right now from the policymakers that decide the interest rates that ultimately drive the peso is that there isn't much concern right now. At least that's the message that I'm receiving. So until we hear a greater sense of urgency, perhaps in a few days, once the Banco Central meets for the interest rate decision, I remain cautious about my outlook for the peso.
And of course, with the recent data from the US of still high inflation numbers, this will definitely mean that the US Central Bank will continue to hike the cost of borrowing. Is the Banco Central behind the curve? By how much more should they raise interest rates to stabilize the peso?
Well, the Banco Central has said that at their next interest rate meeting, that they will take into account what the U.S. Federal Reserve will do. So I think at the very least, they have to match what the U.S. Central Bank will be doing. And I think for the rest of the year, the market is expecting the U.S. Fed to raise rates by 200 basis points, by 2%. I think at the very least, the BSP should match that 2% target. Anything less than that, and it will be further weakening in the peso. But really, I think if the BSP wants to rein in this peso weakness, they will have to go above and beyond that 200 basis point target that the Fed has set for itself.
And if that materializes, this would also hurt the Philippine economy overall, because by raising interest rates, I mean, businesses such as the micro, the small, the medium, and large enterprises will have to pay more for each money that is lent by the banks.
That's true. It is going to hurt borrowers, and I don't envy this decision that our policymakers will have to make. They will ultimately have to decide how much growth they're willing to keep to rein in order to control the depreciating peso, and that's going to be a very delicate balancing act for our decision makers in government.
Worst times for the Philippine peso before it gets any better. Thank you so much for this foreign currency exchange. AAA Southeast Equities President William Cabangon. And now here's a rundown of this week's top business stories. Remittances from overseas Filipinos, as we discussed with Will, hit a 7-month high in July, a gain of 2.3% year-on-year. The Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas attributed the increase to money sent by land and sea-based workers. The provincial government of Cavite awards the multi-billion-dollar Sangli International Airport upgrade project to a consortium with foreign partners. The SPIA Development Consortium's contract is worth $11 billion or over 628 billion pesos. And San Miguel Corporation has secured original proponent status for the Cavite-Batangas Expressway project. And coming up on the exchange, where your business is our business. With millions of Filipinos making a living overseas, some say the weak peso benefits many of our kababayans. We get the thoughts of the Filipino Nurses Association of the UK and the Philippine Chamber of Commerce in Singapore. And with imported products getting more expensive, is the food sector turning to local ingredients? The friendly group of companies joins us right here on CNN Philippines. News you can trust. Glad you're staying with us right here on The Exchange, where your business is our business. I'm Rico Hizon. For overseas Filipinos sending money home, a weaker peso means more pesos in exchange for their foreign currency. And there have been discussions whether or not this is a welcome development. Let's set the record straight with Philippine Chamber of Commerce in Singapore President Christy Vicentina and Filipino Nurses Association UK Officer Louis Carullo Horn. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us. Christy, let me start off with you. Are more of our kababayans in Singapore remitting their dollars because of the depreciating peso? From the last calculation, one Singapore dollar is now equivalent to more than 40 pesos.
Well, thank you, Rico, for that interesting question. While the BSP data shows that there is an increase of remittances coming from Singapore, a slight increase of about 12.5% based on March data against July data. But majority of the Filipinos in Singapore are OFWs, myself included. Therefore, we have a regular obligation to fulfill back home, including financial support to our families. Hence, the changes in currency does not necessarily translate into an increase or decrease in terms of remittances. Maybe the increase that we've seen, if I may share, is derived from a renewed interest for property investment and other form of investment from our both kababayans and local investors.
But Christy, is there some kind of excitement, enthusiasm? Because we haven't seen one Singapore dollar to more than 40 pesos in a very, very long time, because they'll be getting more for their hard-earned Singapore dollars.
There is a little excitement, of course, for an OFW because it's a kind of a promotion for us if you're on the other side of the fence. But let me just clarify that depreciation is not necessarily bad. It depends on where you are, and it depends on the economic objective of the country. So if there is an excitement, there was an initial excitement when it first touches to say 38, 39, and then the first time it touches 40. And then of course, there were corrections in between. But generally, we feel the other side also, because we will need to send a little more because the amount that we used to send is not enough. So that's all in all, it balances.
That's a very good point that you raise, Christy. Louis, what about for you, nurses and other OFWs in the UK? What is the trend? Is there an increase in remittances from Filipinos based there? Because £1 is now equal to almost 66 pesos.
Rico, having been 21 years here, I was here when it was actually 85 pesos to £1. So we now with 66, so they are sending more. That is the trend. Filipino nurses here always check it on they have a checker every day for the remittance companies. And the minute it goes up, majority of them sends money. They are doing more overtime as a result as well. And generally, we don't really like the peso to depreciate more kasi kawawa yung mga kababayan natin. But it's good for us whenever it goes up. And yes, remittance is a way of life for us. We send not even at the end of the month, sometimes twice a month, we send money to the Philippines.
And of course, Christy also made a good point. So even though we see the depreciation of the Philippine peso, you earn more for your hard-earned pounds. But in the Philippines, prices are also going up, especially for your families. They're being hit by rising consumer prices, Louis.
You're absolutely right. Before, you just send £100, for example, and that will be enough for a month. But now Filipino nurses are sending more because their family are saying now to go to a grocery, the normal spend of 5,000 is enough. Now it's nearly 15,000 per grocery that their family is telling them. So no matter how much you send and no matter how much overtime they have, because of the price in the Philippines, it doesn't work as good as we'd like it to be compared to about 10 years ago. So we have to keep on earning more, sending more, because it will it will be just enough for the Philippines, but not over what they need.
Christy, there are around 200,000 Filipinos living and working in Singapore. Are we seeing an increasing trend on the volumes of Singapore dollars that are now being remitted to the Philippines? Especially, you are working in one of the Filipino community hubs in Singapore, which is Lucky Plaza.
Majority of the Filipinos in Singapore are overseas foreign workers, myself included. So for a typical OFW, we have regular financial obligations back home. We send money whether the exchange rate goes up or goes down. In that premise, we don't see a lot of increases or a lot of volatility in terms of volume from the Filipino in Singapore or the Filipino overseas workers in Singapore.
And Louis, what about in the UK? There are more than 160,000 Filipinos living and working there. How do they send money home? Like you, for example, do you go directly to the remittance center or do you remit home through your smartphone?
The remittance company now changed the way they do it. They made it very accessible now, online to do it. And then they have a competitive rate. So we have around 6 very famous, popular remittance companies here. And what they do is they have a very competitive rates. So magagaling mga Filipino nurses. So they have all this in their apps, and then they can actually compare and contrast who has the bigger one. And majority during the COVID, Rico, I just like to point out, Filipinos sent a lot of money during COVID because of their relatives who are sick. So it's easier for us to do it online, and the rates are getting competitive. And like Christy said, however much the rate is, we still need to send money. So it's a regular thing for us. It's a way of life. I've never known any Filipino nurse who hasn't sent money regularly in my 21 years here.
And Christy, are we going to see an increase in remittances from Filipino Singaporeans, especially during the Burr months?
Oh yes, during the Burr months and June, if I may include, and usually March is also another one because these are milestone for Filipinos. Our Christmas is one of the love celebration for Filipinos. June up to September is for our enrollment, and then March is for graduation. We really look forward to these dates when Filipinos send more money.
A lot of expenses for our Filipino overseas workers, particularly for their families here in the Philippines. Thank you so much for this remittance exchange. Philippine Chamber of Commerce in Singapore President Christy Vicentina and Filipino Nurses Association in the UK Officer Louis Carullo Horn. And straight ahead on the exchange, where your business is our business. Some restaurants are dealing with rising costs because of the weak peso. We talk about how the food sector is factoring in higher expenses to the menu and their operations. We have Avin Ong, Fredly Group of Companies founder and CEO. Next on CNN Philippines. News you can trust. Welcome back to the exchange, where your business is our business. I'm Rico Hizon. Businesses have also had to adjust with the peso sinking to historical lows. What is the food sector's plan to cushion the impact of higher prices for imported ingredients? We now have an exchange with Fredly Group of Companies founder and CEO, Avin Ong. Avin, thank you so much for joining us. The Fredly Group has many brands from Macau, Imperial Tea, you have Hosaku International Buffet, you also have your Kitsune Cafe. What has been the impact of this weaker Philippine peso and higher interest rates on your business?
Okay, definitely because of the weaker peso, we are experiencing an increase of food costs. Since most of our brands are international brands, we basically need to import regularly from different parts of the world. So because of that, prices have been increasing. So to be honest with you, all those things that we used to buy in just 1 million, Now it's already 1.1 million. So because of that, of course, our food cost is greatly impacted.
Wow, it has gone up by at least 10%. But what is the percentage
Yeah.
of your local ingredients vis-a-vis your imported ingredients and raw materials?
Okay. We would love to support local. To be honest, we've been trying to look for alternatives by getting more local products. So currently, it's around 20% local products and 80% from abroad. It's just that even if we want to purchase more local products, the volume is not cannot meet our target. So we are facing volume issues. So that's why we had no choice but to also get from abroad.
So where are you facing shortages in terms of local ingredients, Avin?
I think it's the production capacity, I must say. For example, sugar, generally, we have shortages in the Philippines. So it's something that we have to source abroad as well. There are other raw materials. We have farmers, but then the capacity is not something feasible, or they couldn't give us the enough volume. So that's the reason why we have to get it somewhere else.
And the last time we spoke on my other show, The Final Word, the peso was between 54 to 55 pesos to the dollar. Now it's over 57. I mean, how much of an impact does 2 to 3 peso depreciation have on your importation of raw materials?
I think that's going to give us higher food costs. So all those things that we used to import, let's say 100,000, now it's no longer 100,000. And because of that, we've been absorbing a lot of costs on behalf of the customers, because as much as possible, we really don't want to do a price increase for the customers.
Are you saying then, Avin, that you haven't increased the prices on your menus?
Yeah, we have not. Yeah. So we've been trying to absorb all these costs on behalf of the customers, on behalf of our franchisees for the past few years.
All right, absorbing all that cost. That means that also limits your revenues and your bottom line, your earnings. So how are you also managing the risks, Avin?
We manage risk by applying two strategies. Basically, first, we are trying our best to push for products with lower food costs. That way, we can still hit our target profit margin. That's one. We are trying to look for alternatives, or we are trying to support local products. But then, of course, one of the challenges there would be the capacity to produce of our local farmers.
Despite the rising costs and the shortage of local ingredients, are you still aggressively opening new branches with your brands? Are you also expanding despite the challenges?
Yes, that's actually a good question. Apart from Macau Imperial Tea, this year we are very focused in growing our two new brands. Well, three. Liang Crispy Roll, NYFD, that's New York Fries and Dips, a new brand that we acquired just last year, and of course, Happy Kitsune all the way from Paris. So the group plans to open at least 60 branches in the next 24 months for Liang Crispy Roll and New York Fries and Dips.
But Avin, isn't it better to just set up your own brand rather than importing a franchise into the country, which will also lower your costs?
That's a good question. I must admit, in terms of like profit margin or in terms of like earnings, we are getting more earnings from homegrown brands or or from our local brands. Yeah. So for the international brand, honestly, it's really more of a strategy of the group to, of course, make our portfolio more appealing. Right. To investors and to our third parties.
Thank you so much for this food exchange. Fredly Group of Companies founder and CEO, Avin Ong. And this is the exchange who makes sense of the facts and the figures and the ups and downs of the business cycle, because your business is our business. I'm Rico Hizon. Thanks for watching CNN Philippines. News you can use. News you can trust.